This is my second part of my two-part Xenoblade essays showing how for me, the Xenoblade series and the Xenosaga series are all retellings and reimaginings and a reboot of the perfect work story from Xenogears. In this video essay, we will be talking about all the similarities outside of the plot that these games have. There's a lot of things that are similar. I won't be listing everything, just some of the big things. With all that said, let's get started. All Xeno games feature mechs, and they're a big part of the games. In Xenogears and Xenosaga, they're both upgraded when in contact with anima relics, and in Xenoblade 1, the humans that pilot the mechs are converted to be cyborgs. In Xenoblade X, they're just piloted normally, and in Xenoblade 2, they're controlled by the Aegises. Now, in Xenoblade 3, it seems like two people can fuse together to form a mech. Two people piloting a mech is also very similar to how the mechs are in Xenosaga, where two people tend to pilot their mechs. Also, on another note, in Xenoblade 3, with two people fusing together to become one being, which is basically like a mech, this really references the term of anima, even if that's not what they're called. And I say this because so far, of all the fused beings we've seen, it seems to be each fuse consists of one male and one female. And the term anima refers to the term of anima and animus, which is a theme that goes across all of the Xeno games, and it is a psychological term that talks about how every male has an unconscious female side in him, and every female has an unconscious male side in her. Also, in Xenoblade 3, we see that when fused, the characters are also connected to each other's minds and emotions and so on. This basically goes on to the next point. All of the games talk about the collective unconscious, which states in very simple and probably not accurate terms that basically we are all connected, even to our ancestors and even to each other, and how all of this can explain why people and different cultures all over the world across time have the same instincts, legends, and myths, and so on. I'm not really explaining it too well, but I definitely suggest reading into the collective unconscious for better explanation, as well as reading onto the Unus Mundus, which talks about how the physical world is connected to the mental world, as these are all big topics that all of the Xeno games do talk about. This goes into other themes that the games talk about, as they all touch on the same psychological themes, spiritual themes such as religions, reincarnation, spirits, faith, and many other big themes. In general, outside of spiritual ones such as slavery, freedom, free will, love, revenge, cannibalism, conspiracy, science, quantum mechanics, interrace marriage, and many other common, uncommon topics, as well as some taboo topics. Now, I know we talked more about plots in the previous essay, but I'm just saying it again. They all basically have very similar plots, with some differences of course, but the main plot outline again is very similar to one another, which would be basically humans grow to be able to do space travel, try to be a god, and try to take power from a spiritual source, then have the church make a false religion to achieve their goals, while the true god sets a course of events over centuries with the main party during their story to put an end to the bad things happening in the universe, and then lets the universe and the world handle what comes next after all the lies have ended with a new world. Basically, all of this plot stuff, again, I talked about in the previous essay, but that is the summary of the Xeno series basically. And all of the Xeno series, Xenogears, Xenosaga, and Xenoblade, follow that same structure basically. Again, it's too much of a coincidence than just traditional JRPG tropes, especially when it comes from the same creator who's been trying to tell this story since the mid-90s. Another thing that all of them share is the conduit or the Zohar, which is a power source in each of the series that is basically the same in each of the series. In Xenogears and Xenosaga, it's called the Zohar, while in Xenoblade it's called the conduit, and it's basically the same. It's basically even got the same appearance across all three series, and is always a source of infinite power that's been around basically since the Big Bang. And also in terms of Xenosaga and Xenoblade, the Zohar and the conduit were both found in Africa, again in their respective series. Again, basically retelling the same thing. Now, another thing that is very similar that the series do is they have many locations that are very similar to one another. The two biggest examples would be Solaris in Xenogears and Alchemoth and Indol in Xenoblade. These three cities are basically cities in the skies and basically home of the church of their respective games. Another example is in Xenogears. There's a world beneath their planet called the Zeboim Ruins, which is ruins of a previous advanced civilization that no longer exists. This is the same for Xenoblade 2 with the Land of Moritha. Also, during the final boss of Xenogears, you're in a place that basically has 4 glowing orbs with bosses in them. In Xenosaga, when you are fighting the bosses inside Abel's Ark, it's the exact same thing. Now, speaking of bosses, let's switch over to enemies. One big thing that all of these games have in common is people basically being fuel for the enemy and basically being turned into something for the world that they are in. In Xenogears, you have humans who become the wells, and this is needed to power up the Dias system. In Xenosaga, you have the Gnosis, which turns people into these fog-like ghost things that play a big role at the end of Xenosaga. And in terms of Xenoblade, you have the Homes, the Telethia, and they're a big part of Zanza, trying to absorb enough energy to be resurrected. And then basically the High Antias are turned into the Telethias. And then you have the Blades and the Titans in Xenoblade 2 in order to collect data, which then gets fed basically to the Architect, if I remember correctly. Also, each game basically has people that are created to be like humans. In Xenogears, there's Emeralda, in Xenosaga there are the Realians, and in Xenoblade there are the Mims and some Blades. Now, one of the biggest things that the series touches on, all of these games in the Xeno series, is on God being a factor. The true God and a false God. We talked about the false God before, but in terms of the true God, there is the wave existence in Xenogears, who is basically Uru in Xenosaga, and then in a way we have that being Elvis in Xenoblade 1. And I personally have a theory where the wave existence has something to do with Planet Mira from Xenoblade X due to the big mysteries at the end of Xenoblade X in regards to Planet Mira. So I definitely think in Xenoblade 3, we're definitely going to get more information on the wave existence in the Xenoblade retelling of the story. Now, since we just talked about Planet Mira, I also just wanted to add on that the ending for Xenoblade Chronicles X is basically the exact same ending for Xenosaga as a whole, with Xenosaga 3 as the main example, where Xenosaga 3 and Xenoblade X both ends with the people in the respective parties of each game saying that now they are going to be looking for planet Earth so that they can leave the planet they're now calling home to go back to their origins and colonize their origin planet again. For me, again, this is another proof and another similarity that is way too similar to be just a traditional JRPG trope, considering this comes from the same exact creator. It is also very interesting because as I talk about my part 1 video essay of this 2-part video essay series, that Xenoblade Chronicles X for me is parts 1, 2, and 3 of the Perfect Works story in a blended, mixed format, and so is Xenosaga as a whole, with episodes 1, 2, and 3 for me being a blended format of Perfect Works episodes 1, 2, and 3. Again, this is just very, very similar to one another, how the two games that are most identical to each other ends the exact same way, and it's also very similar to the way that the original story outlines for parts 1, 2, and 3 would have also ended. So for me, that plus the way that both of these games are set in space, very futuristic, and that both of these games even end the exact same way, is also another big similarities that the Xeno series as a whole shares. Now, this last big thing that I want to touch on is going to be about the characters. These are mostly just the main party members. I'm not going to be listing every character. I'm going to be listing most of the main party. I'm still talking about most of them. There's also a lot more similarities than what I've mentioned already and what I'm about to mention. I'm just giving a very rough summary because there's just so many things across all of them, including like symbols like Uroboros. I mean, that one you can kind of say is JRPG terms, Uroboros, but the terminology and what it's used in the stories itself is very identical across all of the games. The different types of technology, ether itself, there's a bunch of other stuff that I'm not including in this video essay. But yes, so just keep in mind this is just a very rough summary. With all that said, let's just get into the characters. So again, this is going to be the longest section of this video. So first, in Xenogears, we have Faye, who is a young man with no memory of his past and who was brought to a village where he was raised. He was also reincarnated in many lives along Ellie in order to stop the game's villain. He also has multiple personalities. He also loves Ellie, who the plot surrounds. This is very similar to Shulk and Rex, as both of them have very similar backstories. Only Rex does not have a reincarnation with his love interest, but his ancestors did spend time with his love interest. Also, Rex did not have another personality in him, unlike Shulk and Faye did. There's also Abel in Xenosaga, who is the name of one of Faye's reincarnation from Xenogears, and who also looks a lot like Faye as well. Abel from Xenosaga, that is. Then there is also Noah in Xenoblade 3, which at the moment of this recording, we don't know too much about because the game is not out. But he basically has long black hair that is tied in a ponytail, very similar to Faye. But this particular thing could just be a coincidence. Now, Xenogears also has Ellie, who is the main female. She has reincarnated many times with Faye. She is the daughter of a governmental dad and helps push events of the story forward. She also pilots a white mech, and this is very similar to Shion from Xenosaga, who is the main female of the game. She is the daughter of the governmental dad, and then there's also Nephilim, who looks like a younger Ellie from Xenogears. Then there's also Fiora from Xenoblade, who shares the same main female role, the reincarnation part in a way, kind of, and the white mech concepts. Then in Xenogears, we also have Citan, who knows a lot about what is going on, and who is meant to watch over Faye and wears green, has long black hair, and fights with a katana. This is the exact same thing for Jin from Xenosaga, who is Shion's older brother, and it's also almost the exact same thing with Dunban from Xenoblade 1, though Dunban, unlike the other two, don't wear green. Now, Xenogears also has Bart, who is a prince and a pirate. He wears a long trench coat and has been cast out of his country and is trying to get his throne back, and has an eye patch on his left eye. Xenosaga has Junior, who wears the same style of outfit and is also a pirate and fights with guns. And this is also very similar to Xenoblade 2's Zeke, who is more like Bart than Junior is. And on another note, Junior is a mix of Billy and Bart from Xenogears. And now Billy is kind of the spiritual person in the group, basically being from the church, and this falls in line with Melia from Xenoblade. Then there is Rico from Xenogears, who is a demi-human, which is a half-human, half-creature. This is related to Ziggy from Xenosaga, who is a cyborg, and Nia, who is a flesh eater in Xenoblade. Then there is Emeralda, who is an artificial human created by the past life of Faye in Xenogears. And then there is Cosmos from Xenosaga, and the Mims from Xenoblade, as well as the Blades and Poppy from Xenoblade. So in this little category, I'm saying like the artificial humans, basically. Now, Alma from Xenoblade X looks very similar to Cosmos from Xenosaga and to Telios from Xenosaga. When we see her in her mem form, she resembles Telios, and when we see her in her real form, she resembles Cosmos. Cosmos and Telios from Xenosaga also shares a very unique dynamic between each other. Cosmos is a temporary robot form to hold a spirit, while Telios is the perfected robot form to hold that same spirit. Alma is basically that same concept as well, except that it's mirrored. The form that looks like Telios, her mem form, and it's also the form that we're first introduced her to, is the temporary form to hold her spirit or her consciousness, whereas her real body, the one that looks like Cosmos, is the one that ends up holding her spirit in the end, and is also the one that is her perfect form to hold that spirit. But it's also very similar to Xenosaga, even though it's flipped, because the form that looks like Cosmos ends up keeping that spirit in her, whereas in Xenosaga, Cosmos ends up keeping the spirit in her. So this is another big thing between Xenoblade Chronicles X and Xenosaga that for me really shows that they're basically retelling the same story in a way, but in a very mixed and blended format. Now, another thing that I also wanted to touch on that's very similar to Cosmos and Alma is that Cosmos basically ends up sleeping and recharging, and she's always put into stasis into a oval egg-like pod-shaped thing with computers around it, and Alma's real body that is put into stasis is basically put into a device with the exact same shape and with computers around it as well, further indicating that she is basically Xenoblade's version of Cosmos. And then, then we got Choo-Choo. Don't really like Choo-Choo, but we got Choo-Choo in Xenogears, and which is basically the equivalent of the Nopons in Xenoblade. And in this case, I'm categorizing all the Nopons because, Choo-Choo, there was only one, but Choo-Choo had a big race of whatever Choo-Choo was. Riki for Xenoblade 1, Tatsu, Tora, those are all Nopons, and each Xenoblade game, there's a Nopon in your party, so Choo-Choo is basically the Nopons of Xenogears, basically. Now, there's also an equivalent furry animal companion in Xenosaga, but these are more like mascots than companions, since you only see like 1 or 2 of them in the wild, and then you only see one as a mascot for the UMN system. And Shion has like a stuffed plushie of this particular bunny, but I'm counting that anyway. And last, actually almost last, there is Chaos in Xenosaga, who is basically Elvis and Pyra and Malos from Xenoblade. And these are basically godlike beings that can alter existence in some capacity. Mostly Chaos and Elvis, then Pyra and Malos with Chaos, because they're kind of limited in their abilities, since in the main Xenoblade universe, which would be Xenoblade 2's universe, there's something above them. Whereas in Xenoblade 1, because that was a universe that was created with Klaus's experiment, Elvis ended up becoming the god of that universe, basically. And then there is basically the Sid of the Xeno series, which is the Van Damme characters. Sid being like every Final Fantasy game has a Sid character. So in each Xenoblade game, each Xeno game, there is a Van Damme. There's Vandercam, another Vandercam, then there's Vanguard, then there's Van Damme, then another Van Damme. And I think we're getting another Van Damme in Xenoblade 3 as well. So lots of Van Dammes. Van Dammes are basically the Xenoblade Sids. So with everything said in this video and in the previous video, I definitely feel like this proves, or at least gives enough evidence to prove, how Xenoblade and Xenosaga are basically retellings and reimaginings of the Xenogears game and story and Perfect Work story as a whole. Now, with all that said, I'm really glad that Takahashi is finally being able to tell this story and conclude this story with Xenoblade. I am extremely excited for Xenoblade 3, and I'm just like so excited to see all of the revelations and all of the story elements that we're about to be told. With all that said though, let me know what you guys think about all of this, what I just said. Let me know if you guys definitely do think that Xenoblade and Xenosaga are retellings and reimaginings of the Perfect Work story and Xenogears. Let me know your favorite Xeno game. Is it Xenoblade? Is it Xenogears? Is it Xenosaga? If it's Xenosaga or Xenoblade, which one is it that you prefer? And just let me know in general what you thought of the video too. Sorry for the bad editing for this one, or for these 2 videos. I'm just doing this very rushed because I have a lot to do. But with all that said, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know also your thoughts on Xenoblade 3 and your theories. But yeah, with all that said guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.